October 21st, 1966. A Friday morning in the Welsh valleys. In the village of Aberfan, children are putting on their coats. Mothers are packing school bags. Fathers are already underground, cutting coal in the Merthyr Vale colliery, the mine that has kept this village alive for nearly a century. It is the last day before half-term. The children are excited. A holiday weekend is coming. At Pantglas Junior School, 240 children file into their classrooms. The youngest are 7. The oldest are 11. They hang their coats on numbered hooks. They sit at their desks. They open their books. At 9:13 in the morning, a teacher calls the class to attention. She never finishes the sentence. Above the village, on the mountain slope that overlooks everything, the homes, the streets, the school, something has been moving since dawn. Slowly at first, then faster, then unstoppable. 500,000 tons of coal waste, saturated by underground springs, liquefied by days of rain, begin sliding down the mountain toward the village below. It covers the distance in under 2 minutes. By 9:15, Pantglas Junior School no longer exists. This is the story of Aberfan, not a story of a natural disaster, not an earthquake, not a flood, not a force beyond human control. This is the story of what happens when warnings are ignored for years, when profit is placed above the lives of children, and when an entire community is left to dig through rubble with their bare hands, looking for sons and daughters who will never come home. To understand Aberfan, you have to understand what coal meant to South Wales in 1966. The valleys had been mining country for over 100 years. Every village, every family, every generation shaped by the same rhythm. Men going down, coal coming up. The Merthyr Vale colliery had operated since 1869. It employed most of the men in Aberfan and the surrounding area. Without the mine, there was no village. That was simply the reality. And coal mining produces waste, enormous quantities of it. The rock, the slate, the debris extracted alongside the coal has to go somewhere. So the National Coal Board, the government body that controlled all mining operations in Britain, built tips. Massive piles of colliery waste stacked on the mountainsides above the mining villages. It was standard practice across South Wales. Nobody questioned it. It was just part of the landscape. Above Aberfan, there were 7 of them. Tip number 7 was the largest. By 1966, it stood nearly 111 feet high, containing 500,000 tons of waste. And it had been built on a known natural spring. Not beside it, not near it, directly on top of it. This was not a secret. As far back as 1963, residents of Aberfan had raised formal complaints about the tips. They could see what was happening. After heavy rain, the waste shifted. Small slides occurred regularly. The ground around the base of Tip 7 was perpetually waterlogged. Local councillors wrote letters to the National Coal Board. The concerns were noted, filed, and ignored. In October 1965, exactly 1 year before the disaster, the Aberfan Community Council sent a formal written complaint to the Coal Board. They described the tips as dangerous. They asked for an inspection. They asked for action. The Coal Board responded. They sent an engineer to assess the situation. His report concluded that the tips posed no significant risk. He was wrong. What the Coal Board's engineers either missed or chose not to acknowledge was that Tip 7 was not sitting on solid ground. Beneath it, underground springs had been saturating the base of the tip for years. The waste wasn't compacting. It was slowly absorbing water, becoming heavier, becoming unstable. a geological time bomb sitting directly above a primary school. The children of Pantglas Junior School walked beneath that mountain every single day. Their parents walked beneath it. Their grandparents had walked beneath it. They had no reason to believe it would ever move. The experts had said it was safe. The coal board had said it was safe. On the night of October 20th, 1966, it rained. It had been raining for days. Not dramatically. Not the kind of rain that makes people nervous. Just the steady, persistent Welsh valley rain that soaks into everything. The ground, the hillsides, the mountains of coal waste stacked above the village. By the morning of October 21st, Tip 7 had absorbed more water than it could hold. At approximately 7:30 in the morning, a work crew from the coal board climbed the mountain to inspect the tips. What they found stopped them. The top of Tip 7 had subsided overnight. A large depression had formed where the peak had been. The waste was moving. They had no telephone on the mountain, no radio. No way to call down to the village immediately. One man ran. By the time he reached a telephone, it was already too late. At 9:13, Tip 7 collapsed. It didn't fall like a landslide. It flowed. 500,000 tons of liquefied coal waste moving like a wave, like concrete, like nothing that has a name in ordinary language. It traveled down the mountain at terrifying speed, swallowing a farm cottage, killing everyone inside, then hitting the village. The sound reached Aberfan before the wave did. Survivors describe it differently. Some say it was like thunder. Some say it was like a train. Some say there was no warning at all. One moment the world was normal, the next moment it was gone. The slurry hit Pantglas Junior School at 9:15. The children had been in their classrooms for less than 15 minutes. The wave demolished the rear of the school first, then collapsed the roof. Classrooms filled with black liquid waste in seconds. Desks, books, chairs, walls, everything compressed, buried, sealed. Children who had been sitting at their desks were entombed where they sat. The lucky ones lost consciousness immediately. Others were trapped in air pockets inside the wreckage, alive in the dark, calling for help that took hours to reach them. The slurry also took out a row of houses on Moy Road. Entire families still at breakfast, buried without warning. When the wave finally stopped, 18 houses were destroyed. The junior school was gone. And then the silence. Survivors described the silence as the most terrifying part. The roar, then nothing. Just dust settling over a changed landscape. The first people to respond were the parents. They came running from their homes, from the streets, from wherever they were when the mountain came down. They came with their hands. No equipment, no tools, just hands. Tearing at the black waste, digging, screaming names. Fathers who worked in the mine, men who spent their lives underground, who knew rock and darkness and confined spaces, threw themselves into the rubble with a desperation that had nothing to do with training or procedure. They were looking for their children. What they found in those first minutes was unbearable. Some children were pulled out alive, carried through the wreckage, passed hand to hand across the debris field, rushed to waiting arms. Every survivor pulled from that rubble was a miracle, and for a brief, terrible period, the rescuers allowed themselves to hope. If this one survived, then maybe the next one, maybe the one after. But the air pockets were small, the waste was heavy, dense, still shifting, and the school had been full. By midday, the rescues were becoming recoveries. Police, firefighters, and miners arrived with proper equipment. The coal board sent workers. The army came. Volunteers arrived from across the valley. Men who had never met the people of Aberfan, who simply drove until they reached the village and started digging. At its peak, over 1,000 people were working the site. They worked in near silence. No one needed to explain why. Every person understood that noise might mask a sound from underneath. A child's voice, a movement, a knock against the debris. The rescuers communicated in whispers and hand signals. When someone thought they heard something, a single raised hand stopped everyone. Complete silence. Listening. Sometimes there was something. Mostly there wasn't. Inside the ruins of the school, teachers were found still at their desks, their arms around children, having thrown themselves over their students in the last seconds. They died trying to shield them. The children were still beneath them. One survivor, a young girl named Sharon, was pulled from the rubble hours after the collapse. She had been conscious the entire time, in a small air pocket, unable to move, listening to the sounds of rescue getting closer. She survived. Most of her classmates did not. By late afternoon, it was clear to everyone working the site, though no one said it aloud, that the rescue operation was over. What continued was recovery, the careful, systematic excavation of a mass grave. 116 children died in Pantglas Junior School that morning. 28 adults died in the surrounding houses. 144 people in total, in a village of less than 5,000. In a community where everyone knew everyone, where the dead children had parents who were also neighbors, also friends, also colleagues working the same mine that had produced the waste that killed their sons and daughters. That evening, the fathers who had spent the day digging went home to houses where children's coats still hung by the door, school bags still packed for the holiday weekend, bedrooms that would not be slept in. Aberfan did not sleep that night. The funerals began on October 27th. The village had no cemetery large enough. A new section had to be opened on the hillside above Aberfan. 81 children were buried together in a single long row of white coffins, side by side, the way they had sat in their classrooms. Their teachers were buried beside them. The graves stretched across the hillside in a line that seemed to have no end. The whole world watched. And then the whole world asked the same question. How did this happen? The answer, when it came, was not complicated. A government tribunal led by Lord Justice Edmund Davies spent months examining the evidence. Witnesses testified. Documents were produced. Engineers explained geology. Coal board officials took the stand. The conclusion was unambiguous. The National Coal Board knew the tips were dangerous. They had received the warnings. They had read the letters. They had filed the complaints. They had sent engineers who declared the situation acceptable and moved on. The disaster at Aberfan was not an act of God. It was not an unavoidable tragedy. It was the direct result of institutional negligence, of an organization that chose repeatedly, over years, to ignore the concerns of a working-class community because addressing those concerns would cost money and cause inconvenience. No one went to prison. The coal board was found negligent. It was ordered to contribute to a disaster fund. But the fund itself became a second wound. The government insisted that £150,000 from the charitable donations given by the public, money sent by ordinary people from around the world to help Aberfan survive, be used to pay for the removal of the remaining tips. The tips that should never have been there. the tips that had killed the children. Aberfan was made to pay for its own disaster. It took 30 years for that money to be returned. Lord Robbins, chairman of the National Coal Board, initially claimed the underground spring beneath Tip 7 was unknown and unknowable. The tribunal found that statement to be false. He did not resign. He remained in his position. Aberfan never fully recovered. How could it? A generation of children was gone. The school was eventually demolished. In its place, a memorial garden was built, with flower beds arranged in the outline of the original classrooms, and a fountain at the center marking the spot where the entrance once stood. The garden is quiet and well kept, and heartbreaking. On the hillside cemetery, the row of white grave markers remains. Names carved in stone. Ages that never exceeded 11. There are towns that are defined by what they built. Aberfan is defined by what was taken from it and by who allowed it to happen. The mountain still stands above the valley. The tips are gone now, cleared decades ago. But the village remembers what lived up there, what grew year after year, ignored warning after warning, until the morning it finally came down. 116 children walked into school on October 21st, 1966. They did not walk out. Remember Aberfan.